You're watching a 48-year-old man review Thundercats X Silverhawks. A 48-year-old man with less than 10 subscribers on a Friday night. Think about it. So, I am here in my Too Many Lames t-shirt. Well, I like Too Many Games. It's just that I can't pay $70 for one day. That's insane. But back here trying to cover what Dynamite is really throwing its weight around. It's a Thundercats X Silverhawks crossover. Now, Dynamite has a lot of success with the Thundercats license. I remember like 24 years ago when Wildstorm got it. The first series that came out with the art by Francisco Herrera, J. Scott Campbell, and Ed McGuinness, it did incredibly well. Like, I knew kids, like, there were kids that had grown up with the reruns, and new kids that wanted to read it because the reruns were still a force back then. And then it was looked like one of Wildstorm's hot properties. And then they put out the second miniseries. And that was the end of Ford Lytle Gilmore's writing career in comics. Because that second series was massively unpleasant. And after cursory Thundercats Battle of the Planets crossover, cursory Thundercats Superman crossover, and a couple more miniseries, including one by Fiona Avery that I thought was well written. Remember Fiona Avery? I bet just Michael Straczynski wishes he couldn't. That was pretty much it in comics for Thundercats. I mean, there are attempted revivals over the years, but it seemed with Dynamite and writer Declan Shalvey, you know, who was just as good a writer as he is an artist, it seems to have recovered. The new series ran 25 issues, which is pretty good for a Dynamite title. And at the same time they picked up Thundercats, they picked up Silverhawks, which is also often seen as a sister series. Now, I'm not going to explain the origins or the setups of each cartoon because I don't feel like it. I'm not a huge Thundercats fan, so I didn't really look into I read some of Shalvey's work, and I thought, hey, this is pretty good for what it is. A decent continuation of a decent take on the Thundercats story. And I read Silverhawks, though, because I was a fan of Silverhawks when I was a kid. Although watching how poorly animated the show is now is kind of difficult. But writer Ed Brisson and artist George Cambatis did a 10-issue series, basically kind of jumping ahead in the timeline, doing an old man Silverhawk story where it's the future, they're all retired, Monstar breaks out of his prison and makes everything worse, and they have to try to figure out how to like just defeat him again when he pretty much blows away all the new Silverhawks. And while it wasn't perfect, I don't think George Cambatis is a terrible artist, but I think he is completely atonal for the story. He was completely atonal for the story Brisson was telling. I kind of liked it, and I liked how it wrapped up. Now, I have here today 3 chapters. Well, we have the prequel chapter, Road to War. First chapter, Thundercats X Silverhawks, number 1. And what is being called the second chapter, Mumm-Ra the Ever Living. Now, I'm going to start with this book, Road to War. But basically, it's 3 5-issue miniseries. Thundercats X Silverhawks by Shalvey, the Mumm-Ra the Ever Living origin miniseries by Shalvey and Rapha Lobosco, and Thunderhawks, which takes place in an alternate future where some Thundercats who seem to be time displaced are merging with Silverhawks, which seems to be the issue. I'm not entirely certain. I'm a little confused as to why the Mumm-Ra story is part of Thundercats X Silverhawks, because I've read this issue, and while I'm going to recommend it, it doesn't feel like it needs to be part of this story. There's really no indication that it has anything to do with the overall storyline that's set up in the prequel chapter, or the previous first issue, or the previous issue. But I'll talk about that later. But let's start with Road to War, written by Ed Brisson, drawn by Gerardo Gambone, Andrea Arcari, Chris Campana, Elton Thomasi. Hey, how did somebody I've actually heard of get in there? And so it's told in an anthology format, sort of. It's Chara wakes up, talks to Tigra about a vision she's having from a nightmare, talks to a vision she's about, and then we have three stories. One is a kind of typical young Lion-O story, how he learned to be a leader, how he learned to be deal with bullies when he was a kid. And it's it's solid. You see the Lion-O character development stuff. It's obvious, but that gets the job done. Second story, takes place in the present, and he's assuming after the end of the Silverhawk storyline. Basically, now that they've they've really crippled Monstar and put him back in jail, everything is falling apart. Because it's kind of like when the comics, when they have an excuse like, well, we can't kill the Kingpin or really put him in jail because everyone's going to be vying for the top spot now that he's gone. And this is a similar take on that. Like, all these gangs are trying to fill his vacuum, and they're not succeeding. And the Silverhawks are stretched thin trying to take care of this. And in fact, it climaxes with the chromium of the Silverhawks getting seriously injured, which is funny when you see what happens in the next chapter. And Quicksilver wondering, like, by removing the devil, we may have just damned ourselves. And here's the best chapter, in New Bedlam, 6th Earth, the year 3158. So these are characters from a series I haven't read by Brisson called Thundercats Lost in Time. And somehow they are Thundercats and Silverhawks, Thunderhawks. They seem to be the character Nico seems to be taking responsibility. Basically, this planet, this 6th Earth planet, what's the name of the New Bedlama? They're basically run by a fascist, not fascist, totalitarian police force, featuring robotic Silverhawks. We thought by destroying the precog system we could shut them down. We were wrong. They became crueler. Since they couldn't predict what people would do, they began to control them. So, and Nico believes that's the fault of her and her fellow Thundercats. And they've been trapped on 6th Earth for 6 years. And it's effective, it's an interesting mystery, I thought. And the artwork in all the chapters is actually pretty good. I don't know who did what, but one of the things that Nico is very unhappy about, like, she can't get back to 3rd Earth. No Klaus is stopping the war, saving the Thundercats. So whatever bad future that has come to pass has come to pass, and so something really bad has happened. And again, like, one thing Ed Brisson is good at doing is building a sense of dread in his comics, I think. Like stuff like Sheltered or Violent. I think he's an underrated writer. I always just joke that he's the Canadian Ed Brubaker, and I know doing Thundercats and Silverhawks. It probably isn't in his what he wanted to do with his life, but he's not hacking it. He's still telling an interesting story with it, even if it's filled with kid show tropes. And let's go to the next issue, Thundercats X Silverhawks 1. Now I'm not going to talk a lot about this. Part of it is I think I may have missed what's going on in the ongoing series, but we have where Panther are trapped in what looks like the Silverhawks base, orbiting Third Earth, and he doesn't know how to get down there. They know he's up there. They can't get him. There's also stuff going around in Burma with Jaga, Calico, Wily Kit, and Wily Cat, and I mean the Thundercats are splintered all over Third Earth. And what happens is Chromium and Copper Kid come down to Third Earth to figure out what's going on here. The Interplanetary Force Corps have a jurisdiction in this sector. They tell Bengali, and it doesn't go too well for Chromium. In fact, it goes a lot worse than it did in the prologue chapter, which was kind of funny. And but Copper Kid senses something's wrong with everyone. Then Lion-O tries to get involved, and then Quicksilver tries to get involved. It gets bad. It gets really bad for Lion-O. For Lion-O gets involved, and it gets really bad for Quicksilver. But something really strange happens to Lion-O, and I gotta appreciate what Shalvey did here with giving us a horrible disaster, then a horrible disaster, and then a horrible disaster you weren't thinking of at the time. And then the strange vessel that Panther is captured on launches one of those evil robot Silverhawks. I mean, all of this is plot, but it moves quickly. It's well drawn, and it's entertaining enough. And now we get to the third chapter. I mean, the third issue, I should say. This is the second chapter. And here's where I go in. Now, it's Mumm-Ra the Ever Living. And we find out he was a crass Egyptian slave, a conniving, power mad. He was basically a dick. And all he cared about was power. His name was Rama Mises Mi Atumu. And he wanted power because he wanted a different life. Control, might, supremacy, dominance. Those were the gods that offered him. And it's a typical story about two slaves trying to get out of getting out of it, and one slave, and you can tell the guy destined to become how the guy destined to become Mumm-Ra will behave, and it's bleak and dark, and it's well done. I really appreciated Rapha Lobosco's art here. I thought it was just very effective, and the layouts are good. I like the facial expressions. I like the big climactic shadow fight. Not shadow fight, what happened in a shadow. But one problem. The character that becomes Mumm-Ra, there's nothing to him. He's just a jerk. He's going to become a bigger jerk. I just don't see the story needed to be 5 issues. I think it could have been an annual. And again, there's no real indication how this ties in to the rest of the Thundercats Silverhawks crossover. I mean, basically it becomes Mumm-Ra by the end of the issue, and I'm just not sure how that's supposed to expand into 5 issues, because the character's never been all that interesting as a villain. I mean, he works for a Saturday morning. He works for a weekday cartoon, but other than that, I don't know. But on the other hand, it's extremely well executed, and I like the color work by a guy I've never heard of called Roshan Kurichiyanil. It's a weird, like, all three issues are well done, well executed, but I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it either. I'm interested enough to keep reading. Like, it's just that, like, it's difficult to grab onto a character I care about, because I'm not a huge fan of either property. Like, I would say I'm a bigger Ed Brisson or Declan Shalvey fan than I am of Thundercats or Silverhawks. Though I did like Silverhawks a lot. I will say that. There's a character that Brisson hasn't used yet that I know he's probably keeping in his back pocket. That, like, it was in the best episode of the show. And I just know, given what's part of the story takes place in the future, that he's going to use that character. It's just going to be interesting how he tries to do it. But we do get, like, so would I recommend these? Yeah. If you're a fan of both properties, definitely read them. If you're not a fan of both properties, why are you watching this? Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next time.